Okay, next up we're going to talk about sandpaper and how to use it properly. There are loads of numbers, we don't know what they mean, we don't know how to use them, we don't know what, when, where. So I'm going to try and shed some light. So I've got a few in here and I tried to get not too many. I've only got about 5 in here, and really there are loads of numbers. So you'll see when you get paper, it's got a number that says P120 or P180 or something, or sometimes it'll have a G. So basically what that means is the grit. G is for grit. Actually, I don't know what P is for, but the smaller the number, the bigger the grit, the rougher the paper. So you can see in this one, this is 40, and then I've got another one that says 80. And as we run down the numbers, you'll see that the paper gets smoother and smoother. So we've got 40, 80, 120, 180, and 400. These are the ones that you will use most of the time. Depending on what you do, if you do a lot of automotive work, you will use up to 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 grit. And at that point, they're so fine, it's almost like a paste. You can actually get a paste, an abrasive paste, and this is a really good way to get a mirror shine, a mirror finish. So 40, or sometimes it's not always easy to get 40, 60 is one that you get more often. But let's say 40 to 60 is very rough. This is when you want to remove a lot of material quickly. So say you're working on a wall like this and it's a bit rough. You just want to remove a lot of plaster, maybe a lot of filler, before you smooth it out. Normally you start with a rough one and then you go down the grits. So maybe you start with, to be honest, a 40, it's more for paint effects. And if you have a look at the segment on paint effects and brushes, you'll see that I'll use this to rough up some wood to create some grain and some texture. But this is mostly what it's used for. As far as murals, as far as painting walls, the ones you'll use pretty much all the time, whether it's a plasterboard wall, a plaster wall, all that kind of stuff, you'll use 80, 120, and 180 sometimes if you want to get smooth. A lot of the time for walls, you can just get away with 120. 120 is really good medium. It's kind of like in between. And for walls like this, you can just do the whole thing with 120. If the filler or the plaster is kind of rough, you want to start with 80, then go down to 120. And if you really don't want to see any of those scuff marks, you can use 180, or 250 is another good one. 250, you're removing just a little bit of material, and then the problem is then the paper gets clogged up very quickly with filler. So it all depends how good you want the job to be and how quick it needs to be. Now this is for walls and for wood and for all that kind of stuff. For metal, 180 or even 250 is very rough. 320 or 400 would be what you would want to start sanding metal. So say if you work on a car, you really want to start at 400. 320 is the absolute minimum you want to work on a car, because say, without going to this extreme of the 40, if I was to use a 120 on a car, on a panel of a car, I will leave some scuff marks so deep, then even if I go down in the grids, I won't get rid of all the marks and they'll always show, so it won't be a good job. So with a car, or so anything to do with plastic or metal, you want to start at about 400 and then go down to 600, 800, all that kind of stuff. And then you'll get a good finish. You'll see that the paper comes in sheets like this, square or round or other different shapes. This is for orbital sander. I've got a little palm sander with a battery. It's very useful, very handy. And then again, it comes with different grids. At home, I've got all the way to 800, I think. But most of the time I use the 120. Now I just buy one. I just buy a 120 grade. I actually only bought these for the video, but normally I just buy 120. For me, it's like a one does all. It's really versatile. But try a few and see what works for you. Some people prefer 180 because it's a bit smoother. I just find it gets clogged up and you don't really see the difference. So, that's down to you. Another thing as well you'll find is these are yellow. I mean, some of them are blue, some of them are black, some of them are yellow, some of them are red. It's different companies, first of all, and then the abrasive material they use are different. But basically, these ones are meant to be used dry. So you use a piece of sandpaper, and then you will just sand your wall. This is how it works. With these ones, these are wet and dry. So what you do is you wet the paper, and then you will sand your body, the car panel or whatever. So you'll put some water either with a sponge or a squeegee, or you'll dip the paper in a bucket, and then you'll sand it this way. It allows you to have a much smoother and cleaner job when you're sanding, because a lot of the time when you're sanding, you're going to create dust everywhere. So with a wet and dry paper, it allows you to keep the dust obviously to a minimum, because it's turning into a paste with the water, and it just does a better job. So if you're working on cars, metals, plastic, all that kind of stuff, you'll want like a 400 all the way to say 2000. After that, you can use a rubbing compound, which is like an abrasive paste, or you can just use these from start to finish. If you're working on walls, you can use these ones. Like I said, 120 is a really good one. Another thing as well you want to do is you want to avoid just going back and forth when you're sanding, especially a car. Again, cars are unforgiving. You need to prepare them so much. The artwork is actually the part that takes the least amount of time. The prep and the finish, when it comes to a car, are so important that I've seen mediocre artwork that look amazing. Well, I mean, the car looks good because the prep and the finish look really good. But I've seen the other way around, and if the artwork is great, but the finish is not great, it really lets down the job massively. So you really want to pay attention to your prep and your finish. But another thing you want to do is you want to try and go in a circular motion or in a random motion. You don't just want to go in the same direction, otherwise you'll see the marks on the surface, and it really shows.